All right, so we got some unfortunate updates here on the prosecution of the journalist Julian Assange by the United States, as a UK judge has officially ruled that he can, in fact, be extradited to the United States, where he will be facing trial for espionage and may be facing upwards of 170 years in prison. And this is coming after being held up in the Ecuadorian embassy for roughly 7 years and after spending 2.5 years in British jails, basically for the crime of exposing U.S. war crimes. Okay, so again, this is the epitome of journalism. This is what it actually looks like to hold the powerful accountable. And when you are coming up against the almighty and powerful U.S. empire, they are going to bring down the full force that they have against you. And so just to give you a reminder in terms of where we were before this decision was made by this UK judge, this is from about January of earlier this year. Basically, this UK judge was saying that Julian Assange could not be extradited to the United States because our prison systems, and specifically the maximum security prisons that the US was planning on throwing him in, are so barbaric and brutal that it would actually be a direct threat to his health to allow him to be extradited to stand trial in the United States. Now, as I was saying, unfortunately, a UK court has officially ruled that Julian Assange can be extradited to the United States. And here from the New York Times, they say the WikiLeaks founder will seek to appeal, but if the extradition goes ahead, he would face espionage charges that could put him in prison for decades. And basically, the reason why this UK judge ended up changing their opinion on the prison situation that he would be facing in the United States was based on completely bullshit assurances from the United States. They basically came out and they said, don't worry about it. We're probably not going to throw him in this specific maximum security prison that they were talking about at the time. And don't worry about it. Nothing to worry here. He'll be treated just fine. Okay. And so basically, this UK court, which has really been working in tandem with the United States throughout the entirety of this process and is really subservient to the United States in many ways, basically just took the US at their word. Now, this is so completely ridiculous at face value. And you see here from Amnesty International, even if the United States is committing, or so-called committing, that they will not be putting him in one of these maximum security prisons. Keep in mind, this is a journalist that we are talking about, okay? We're not talking about like some crazy, pedophile murderer or something like that. We are talking about an actual journalist facing maximum security prison for more than a lifetime, potentially, in terms of his sentence. So you see here from Amnesty International, the U.S. diplomatic assurances are inherently unreliable. Julian Assange must be released. Okay, and so they are absolutely right. And just to give you a perspective in terms of how ridiculous these assurances actually are, so basically the CIA, okay, the director of the CIA will have a large role in determining whether or not Julian Assange, once he is extradited to the United States, where he will be ending up being placed, basically. Okay, so the CIA, the head of the CIA, is going to have a big role in making that decision. Okay. This is the same CIA that under the Trump administration in roughly 2017 was planning on literally kidnapping and/or assassinating Julian Assange. Okay, so this is what the CIA was planning to do to Julian Assange. Now, do you think that the CIA or any of the United States institutions are going to be able to give him a fair trial, let alone treat him in any reasonable way once they do go through with these sham charges and this sham trial? I don't think so. Okay, so again, the CIA planned under the Trump administration literally to kidnap and assassinate Julian Assange, and they are now going to have large sway if he is extradited to the United States, which it seems like he will be at this point. But they are going to basically get to decide what happens to a large degree to Julian Assange once he gets here. And just to throw our faces in it, just to rub salt in the wound, basically, Secretary Anthony Blinken, a representative of the State Department for the Joe Biden administration, has just in the last couple of days been participating in the Summit for Democracy, where he has been talking all about press freedoms and mysteriously doesn't mention Julian Assange throughout this entire process. So I just wanted to play you a short little clip here just to give you a perspective in terms of how absurd this is that the United States or the Joe Biden administration continue to come out, right? And there was all of this talk under the Trump administration. He's attacking the free press, yada, 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 which sure, yeah, he was in many different ways. But how the fuck are you going to pretend to give a single solitary shit about a free press when you are prosecuting a journalist for exposing your crimes? But here is Secretary Anthony Blinken rubbing our faces in it.
At the Summit for Democracy this week, we're asking governments to make concrete commitments to strengthen free, independent media and help tackle the diverse challenges that they face. Today, I'd like to highlight 4 ways the United States is doing that, among others. First, we're increasing protection for the free press here at home. In July, the Department of Justice adopted a new policy to stop using subpoenas, warrants, and other investigative powers to obtain notes, work products, or other information from journalists engaged in news-gathering activities. Second, at the summit, we are announcing significant new investments to support independent media in financial peril. We'll make the biggest contribution by any government to the recently launched International Fund for Public Interest Media, an innovative new initiative that provides assistance to at-risk independent news outlets. The fund will be administered not by governments, but by an inclusive group of independent, well-respected journalists, media, and financial experts. In addition, USAID will announce the launch of a Media Viability Accelerator.
All right, so you get the point, okay? A whole bunch of vacuous nonsense coming out of Anthony Blinken's mouth. He does not give a single shit, just like Joe Biden does not give a single shit about press freedoms. If they actually did, they would drop the charges against Assange right now, okay? There would be absolutely no hesitation, so don't listen to anything that he is saying. He is a goddamn liar for the State Department. But again, just rubbing our faces in it 2 times now, not only talking about so-called press freedoms that they have as and apparently as one of their top priorities, but also here he was talking about, so you see here from Kevin Gostola pointing out the hypocrisy here, but he says the UK High Court will rule on whether the US government may extradite Julian Assange. We now know the result of that ruling, but here is Secretary of State Anthony Blinken waxing on about political prisoners while working for a government fighting to keep a publisher in jail.
Then a million.
And not only that, as you see down here, in another context, watch Secretary of State Anthony Blinken speak about political prisoners and think of the US human rights attorney Stephen Donziger, who I've covered on this channel multiple times. He went to prison after Chevron-linked judges and private prosecutors hijacked the judicial process, and the Biden administration allowed it. So again, on multiple different fronts, okay, here's the underlying lesson that I'm trying to get you guys to understand. Not only do they not care about press freedoms or political prisoners or anything like that, but it's the exact opposite, okay? This is the epitome. This is a perfect example of what actually happens when you do your job. In the case of Julian Assange, he is a perfect example of the consequences that you will face if you actually do the job of a journalist, which is supposed to be in an ideal world where you actually have a democracy and a real independent free press, as Secretary of State Anthony Blinken was just talking about. Julian Assange, what he was doing is exposing the crimes of the powerful. He was exposing U.S. war crimes that were committed in Afghanistan and Iraq. And notably, the U.S., or anybody really, doesn't really even pretend to claim that any of the information that Julian Assange put out there was false. Everything that he released was just information that was coming straight out of leaked documents that were given to him by Chelsea Manning. And these documents were 100% accurate, okay? It's not like he was fabricating information to put out there to lie to people or anything like that. He was just releasing information that is directly valuable for the U.S. public to be aware of, so that we can then make our decisions within this so-called democracy to hold our political leaders and institutions accountable. That is exactly what it means to be an actual journalist in a so-called democracy. And what happens to Julian Assange for doing his job in that way? He gets potentially is facing decades and decades and decades in jail and brutal borderline torture, if not actual torture, that he has been facing both in Belmarsh in Britain and what he will inevitably be facing here in the United States if he is inevitably convicted, okay? So that's the punishment for actually doing the job of a journalist, okay? And in the case of Stephen Donziger, that's the punishment for challenging global capital. So we have on 2 fronts. If you confront the U.S. empire, our direct imperialist institutions and our military, or if you confront global capital in the way that Stephen Donziger did, and just as a quick little reductive reminder, he basically won a case on behalf of indigenous people in Ecuador after Chevron, this gigantic oil company, created a massive environmental hazard in the Amazon rainforest. They polluted an area the size of fucking Rhode Island, and Stephen Donziger goes in there as their legal representative and ends up winning a case for billions of dollars to get Chevron to go and clean up the mess. And instead of cleaning up the mess, Chevron turns around and comes back to the United States and prosecutes Julian Assange with their own corrupted judges and their own corrupted lawyers, and ends up throwing him in jail in a completely unprecedented trial that has literally never happened to a legal representative for the charges that he was facing, okay? So Again, understand, this is the crime of doing your actual job, whether it's being a real journalist under a functioning democracy or whether it's challenging global capitalist internationalist companies like Chevron. These are going to be the consequences if you live in the United States, or even in the case of Julian Assange, we're talking about a foreign national. So think about the consequences of that in an international free press, okay? This guy is not even from the United States, and we are extraditing a foreign national to the United States for publishing real documents about U.S. war crimes. It's just absolutely insane, but you see through their complete bullshit that they continue to spew on a daily basis. This was coming as the Julian Assange news was breaking, okay? He's out here fucking around talking about free press and talking about political prisoners without even a modicum of an ability to look in the fucking mirror on these situations. It's just completely pathetic. And if you thought that the US media here, the corporate media specifically, was going to push back on this at all, you would be wrong, okay? So here is the one of the most popular morning shows in the United States, specifically Morning Joe, who had on goddamn Claire McCaskill, one of the most repulsive political figures right now that we have in our politics, but they basically were just railing against Julian Assange and saying that this is an open and shut case, okay? So the owned US media, okay, is railing against Assange. They are not even recognizing, or maybe they are recognizing this moment and it just doesn't matter because of how corrupted their own interests are, whether it's in corporate media on CNN, MSNBC, or Fox News. These people cannot even recognize the threat to their own jobs that a prosecution of Julian Assange would impose, okay? These people are coming out here and defending the prosecution of a journalist for literally doing the job of a journalist. And you know why they're okay with Julian Assange being prosecuted? It's not because they're necessarily, insanely stupid, which I think, Joe Scarborough is pretty stupid. But on top of that, these motherfuckers are just corporate mouthpieces. They are just State Department stenographers. They are just propagandists for the status quo. They are propagandists for the military-industrial complex. They are propagandists for capitalism, okay? So that is their role within the structure and the ecosystem of our corporate media that we have here in the United States. So of course, they are not going to stand up and defend a journalist who actually does the job of a journalist, because Joe Scarborough and motherfuckers like him in the mainstream media, in the establishment press, they are fully ready to accept this result because it doesn't pose a threat to their job, which is not doing actual journalism, okay? So again, when you defend the status quo, of course you're not going to think that this is a threat to your job, because Joe Scarborough is not out here doing actual journalism. He is not out here exposing the crimes of the powerful or holding the wealthy and the elite accountable, which is the job of a journalist. So he's not nervous for obvious reasons. And just to give you a perspective, okay, Joe Scarborough, even Joe Biden right now, they are to the right of even the Obama administration's position on Julian Assange. They are towing the line for Donald Trump's position on Julian Assange, okay? So just a reminder, Obama decided not to prosecute Julian Assange because he knew that it would pose a threat to all of these other journalistic publications like the New York Times. You see here an article from 2018 from Glenn Greenwald when we were first learning about a lot of these Trump administration proceedings. But he says, as the Obama DOJ concluded, prosecution of Julian Assange for publishing documents poses grave threats to press freedom. So basically, again, the Obama administration said, we can't go after Julian Assange unless we want to also go after news publications like the New York Times and the Washington Post, who do the same shit that he was doing at the time all the time. They do this on a day-to-day basis. This is what it means to interact with inside sources, whether it's within the government, within the military. This is what it means to get leaks to you so that you can then have whistleblowers who come forward and bring things out into the public's knowledge, which they deserve to know, like the US committing war crimes in Afghanistan and Iraq. Okay, so again, this is just a brazen and blatant attack on the free press, okay? Joe Biden, his administration, cannot pretend for a single second to give a single solitary fuck about the free press or the independent media, as they are calling it, unless they drop the charges against Julian Assange and Stephen Donziger immediately.